Hello everyone and welcome to the first ever Save the Children and UNICEF 2017 election MP Hot Seat. We're really excited to have such a great lineup of panelists today. So thank you for everyone for coming along, especially our panel and everyone that's joining us online via live stream. So I'm your host, Amandi Wersender. I'm a student here at Wellington Girls College, as well as a youth ambassador from Save the Children. Joining me is a team of volunteers that also go to Wellington Girls, and Wechu that's going to be joining me as my timekeeper to make sure our panelists don't go over time. Before I introduce the rules, I'd like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves, their party that they represent, and their portfolio.
Kia ora tātou, my name is Jack McDonald. I'm the Green Party candidate for the Aotearoa, which is the West Coast Māori seat, the second biggest electorate in the country, and I'm particularly passionate about youth issues, being one of our young candidates. Kia ora.
Hello everyone, it's really great to be here. My daughter graduated from Wellington Girls 10 years ago actually. I'm Carolyn, I'm the National Party candidate for Reedy-Taare, which is up the road. I don't know if any of you guys are from Reedy-Taare. And I don't have a portfolio per se other than to know a bit about everything.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui ki koutou katoa. I'm Grant Robertson, the Labour MP for Wellington Central, and I'm also our finance spokesperson.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Reedy-Taare. I'm standing for Te Kaitonga, which is actually the biggest electorate in the entire world, also the most beautiful, and I'm really pleased to be here today. So what enthuses me? Well, just about everything, because everything affects Māori. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, my name is Jessica Hammond Doube. I'm the Ohariu candidate for the Opportunities Party and a alumni of Wellington Girls College, so I'm happy to be back here.
Thank you everyone. Unfortunately, Bali from United Future could not make it today and he does send his apologies. Now, the rules for this hot seat are very simple. The questions have been collected and pulled from youth all over New Zealand, and we have 6 questions being asked by our question representatives in the front row here. The parties, the first 2 questions, as well as the final question, will be answered by all parties, and they will have 1 minute each to answer. The first bell will go off when there are 10 seconds left, and then another one will go off at the end. At this point, I will have to politely interrupt you, and you will have to stop, sorry. Questions 3, 4, and 5 are to be answered by the 2 named parties only. Each party will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Again, a warning bell will go off at 1 minute, and then again at 1.5 minutes. For every new question, the order in which representatives answer will change. And yeah, the time that each party has to answer a question is really short and sweet, because you know this is a hot seat. And you've got to be succinct and straight to the point, please. When it is your round, I do ask that you please stand and otherwise remain seated, and please only start answering the question when I do call your name. Do you guys have any further questions? Awesome, let's get started. So can we have question 1, which is a all-party answer?
Hi, my name is Freya, and this question comes from schools in Canterbury. What policies do you have aimed at ensuring New Zealand's youth have a bright and prosperous future in terms of employment, home ownership, cost of living versus income, and affordable education?
So you guys have 1 minute to answer. Can we start with Grant from Wellington?
Cool, thank you so much for the question. I could go through heaps, but I'm going to stick with the one we announced really this week, which is that we want every single New Zealander when you leave school to get into further educational training. So we're going to make 3 years of further educational training, if it's at university or polytech or anywhere else, we're going to make that free. And we're going to make sure that students can actually get more money to support themselves to live. So we're giving everybody a $50 a week increase in their student allowance or their student loan living cost component. Going on and getting more education and more training is the best thing that we can do to support you to succeed into jobs in the future. There's going to be a huge revolution in the kind of work that we do with automation, with robots, with artificial intelligence. We need every single New Zealander being able to learn and study and not be pushed out because of the cost.
Okay, thank you. Can we have Caroline from National next?
So again, there's quite a lot of things. First of all, there's things that are happening within the schools. So there's a new digital literacy emphasis. So teachers will be trained on improving the digital literacy teaching in high schools and in primary schools. So that will mean not just using devices, but actually programming devices, because we know that the change in terms of technology input into jobs is really important. So that'll happen in the schools. Then going out of schools, we're not focusing just on tertiary education. There's also, like in the sense of universities, but there's also a lot more apprenticeships for trade being opened up and created. There's more accommodation allowance coming in the first April next year. So we're looking at that transition from high school into training, and then from training into work and support for that.
Thank you. And Jack from Green, please.
Kia ora, thank you for the question. So one of the issues that I'm prioritising in this election and that I'm most passionate about is the fact that there are 91,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 24 who are not in employment, education or training. Now I think that is a national disgrace and something that represents so much wasted opportunity. I think about so many of my own generation who are in the same situation, my own friends and peers. And it's not their own fault, but the jobs aren't there, the apprenticeships aren't there, the placements aren't there for further training, and the student support isn't there to be able to get higher education as well. So we need to be addressing all of those things. We need to be ensuring that there is a pathway into either further education or into work when someone's leaving school. I think we also need an acknowledgement that not everyone can or should go to university, that we need to make the most of young people's aspirations, hopes and dreams and skills in whatever form that takes. Kia ora.
Thank you. Jessica from the Opportunities Party.
Yeah, so in terms of the home ownership and the cost of living, the thing that's driving poverty more than anything else at the moment is the cost of accommodation. And I know this sounds really dull, but the problem is with our tax system. So we've got the biggest tax loophole in the OECD and the most unaffordable housing in the OECD. And that is absolutely no coincidence. So we have an $11 billion tax loophole. So that means if we were taxing property the way we tax other assets, we could have $11 billion more that we could give back in terms of tax cuts, which gives people more money to spend on the things they need. Also, because there's this huge tax loophole, New Zealanders put all of our savings into property instead of into businesses. And that's why we have a dumb economy instead of a smart economy.
Thank you. And finally, May from the Māori Party.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Let me make it clear that the role of the Māori Party when it gets into government is to hold these lovely people, whether it's the red government or a blue government, to hold them accountable. So what the Māori Party, what I want to talk to you about today is your employment opportunities. I want to make sure that when you start work, the job that you are going to get is not $15 an hour. You're going to get paid a living wage. That living wage will be at least $20 an hour. Now, isn't that a crazy conversation to be even having, that that's the amount of money that you should be looking forward to? But do you know that there are more people now who are not getting paid a living wage, and that is what we should be most passionate about, so that the most vulnerable person amongst you, who will be a young Māori woman working in a casual job, will not get paid even that amount of money. So that's where my passion lies, and I hope it's yours too. Kia ora.
Thank you. Okay, can we please... Thank you. Can we please have question 2, which is another all-party answer?
My name is Jay, and this question comes from schools in Wellington and in Christchurch. What will your party do for children and youth with mental illness, including those who struggle with suicide? Can you give some examples of programs to help young people in need?
Okay, you guys will have 1 minute to answer, and we're starting again with Grant from the Left Party.
That's such a great question. So to answer it really specifically for you, we're going to make sure that in every single secondary school in New Zealand there is a school-based health service, a nurse who can see you immediately, and access to the specialist mental health services that you need. It's incredibly important that we get that happening in a timely manner. At the moment, depending on where you are in the country, it can take up to 3 months to be seen by a specialist service. And 3 months is a crack that far too many people can fall through. So that's one specific program that we're going to have every school having a school-based health service so that you can get the support that you need. We're also going to be having community mental health teams who do the same kind of work but out in the wider community as well. We lose more people to suicide in New Zealand than we do to the road toll, but we don't talk as much about it. And the most important thing I think we can do now is provide those services and keep that conversation going.
Okay, thank you. Next can we have Jessica from the top.
So you guys live really stressful lives these days. You know, the prospect of having increased casualisation of work, high housing costs, student loans. I still have a student loan. It's ridiculous. So one of the things we want to do to relieve that stress from young people is an unconditional basic income for all people aged 18 to 23 of $200 a week. No matter what you're doing, you get that basic level of dignity and security. The other thing we want to do is we want to legalise and regulate the sale of cannabis and increase the excise on alcohol. That gives us $450 million a year, and we want all of that money to go into mental health and addiction services. That is vastly, vastly more than any other party is promising in this area.
Thank you. The next one is for Mayor from Māori.
Well, kia ora again. So, you may have actually noticed recently on social media that 579 pairs of shoes, empty shoes, are being laid out in various areas throughout the country. These shoes represent the people that we have lost to suicide in 2016. The Māori Party are particularly concerned about it because a lot of those shoes belong to Māori people. So we already have a program in place. It's called Oranga Tamariki, Oranga Rangatahi, and $8 million was put into that program this year, and we intend to keep supporting that program and ensuring that the whānau order approach is put in place so that when young people, when whānau are feeling vulnerable and in that dangerous space, we can be there to support RAP services around and support them. Kia ora.
Thank you. Carolyn from National.
So I don't have to talk about the Māori program because May just did it, and that's done in partnership with the national government. But what we have said is that we are going to expand the school-based health services to include more people working with youth for mental health issues. But the other thing is it's not just about actually working with youth when they already have mental health issues, but it's actually looking at the underlying situations that give rise to those. So that's where we're providing more wraparound services at the family level in terms of supporting families out of poverty. So there's a family incomes package which will lift more families out of poverty that starts in April next year. And that will mean that there will be less financial stress on households, which means there's less stress filtering down from parents to children and youth. So those kinds of things, providing wraparound services, are really important, a part of the policy.
Thank you, and Jack McGreen's last one.
Kia ora. So we do have a mental health crisis in this country. We have some of the highest rates of suicide in the OECD, and this is particularly impacting on young people and rangatahi Māori. And we have to address this. Now, this is partly as a result of the fact that the national government has chronically underfunded the health system. That has led to DHBs not being able to allocate resources where they need to be allocated, including here in Wellington. So in the Hutt Valley, there have been wait times of up to 11 weeks for young people to see mental health services. That's completely unacceptable at a time of crisis. In terms of the question of practical examples, just last week I was at Kapiti Youth Support for an election forum there. Now that's an amazing service, a one-stop shop for mental health services for young people. Now they have to contest for funding every single year. The national government doesn't even secure their funding. I'm really proud of the work of our spokesperson on this, Jan Loki, who helped set up Vibe, another one-stop shop for youth. And so the Greens are absolutely committed to this and will prioritise it.
Can we please have question 3 from National and Labour?
Hi, I'm Ace. This question comes from Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. What is your plan to help low-income families, and especially their children, out of the poverty trap, especially when the cost of living is getting more expensive? Thank you.
Okay, so this is another 1.5 minute question. Remember that you get one ballot at 1 minute and two or three at 1.5. Can we please have Carolyn for question first?
Alright, so it wasn't turned on. That one's turned on but not working, and this one wasn't on. Sorry, so can you start your minute now? So, as I mentioned before, we have the family incomes package, which is designed to give more families a handout rather than just a handout, and it starts for 1 April next year. So, not only as it's providing a change in the tax bracket, so everyone has more money in their pockets, which means families have more money to spend. The average family, there's 1.3 million families will have another $26 a week to spend after the tax brackets are adjusted. So that's kind of the boring detail part. Then there's also a change in the Working for Families supplement. So families who are finding it hard to make ends meet can get Working for Families, and the amounts that are being paid in that are going up, as well as the accommodation supplement, which recognizes the higher costs of living. So those are, that package being implemented will lift another 50,000 children above the poverty line when it comes into play next year. So that is one of the things that National has promised in the budget in May that would help low-income families. The other thing is that there is the additional apprenticeships and training and programs, which education and having training and ability to have a job are actually really important to lifting low-income families out of poverty or out of the lifestyle that they're living, and that is one of the things that we're really committed to doing.
Sorry, stop you there. Okay, and can we have Grafton Briggs?
No, from Labour, yes. we get on really well, but we haven't kind of gone that far yet. Just going steady, that's all. So look, this is a really important question for New Zealand, because it's actually a moral question about what kind of country we want to live in. Do we want to live in a country where everybody gets the same opportunities, or one where we get more and more unequal? And from the Labour Party point of view, one of our #1 priorities is making sure that we lift children out of poverty. It is partly about income, and so we've got a different package from the National Party. Our one focuses on people on the lowest incomes. So what that means is the tax cuts that Carolyn was talking about, we're not going to do those, because $400 million of those goes to the top 10% richest people in New Zealand. And we don't think people like me, who earn a really good salary, should have a tax cut. What we want to do is take that money and reinvest it in things like good quality housing, good health services, and also in making sure that we lift the incomes of those poorest families. So anyone whose family earns $62,000 or less, they'll be better off under our package, because people like me are not going to get a tax cut. The last thing I want to say in my final 30 seconds is that critical to people's cost of living is actually the cost of their housing, and also the quality of their housing. And I don't know if you guys saw the story that came out of Auckland recently of someone who died in a cold house. Well, there'll be 1,600 people who do that in New Zealand this year. We've got to make sure that every single house in New Zealand is warm and dry and safe, and we will pass a law to make sure that every house is warm, dry and safe.
Thank you. Can we please have question 4 for the Greens and Opportunities parties?
My name is Eleanor, and this question is from Nelson in Wellington. Do you think that including youth directly in your decision making is important? And if so, how will you ensure you will do this and ensure the government does this also?
Okay, first can we have Jack from Greens?
Kia ora. So as I said at the beginning, this is one of my biggest areas of interest. And so one of the things that I would want to do if I'm elected as an MP after the election, which I'd just say very briefly, is very possible if you give your party vote to the Greens. And not only just me, but also my friend Tori Swarbrick, who you might have heard of, who's even younger than me, even higher on the list than me, which is a demonstration of how committed to youth representation the Green Party is. But as I was saying, one of the things that I'd want to prioritise if I do get in is civics education and lowering the voting age. I think that that's one of the best ways of actually getting young people involved in our democracy. If we're learning about civics education
along with us. And I think it was a really exciting process for those people involved, and I would love to see more engagement from young people in actually developing the policies that affect them.
Thank you. So question 5 is for the Māori Party and is volunteer from another party since United Future was not able to join us today. You can listen to the question before you volunteer. So can we please have question 5?
Hi, my name is Cam, and this question's from a group of teens from Wainuiomata in Wellington. Does your party support programs aimed at educating teens on sex and consent inclusive of LGBT perspectives? And if so, how do you ensure that such programs become part of our high school education?
So yeah, May first.
Kia ora koutou. I found this an incredibly interesting question. I want to say yes, the party, not just the party, but me too. We should definitely be supporting, exactly answering your question with a resounding yes. So, the one thing I wanted to say to you was that our party, the Māori Party, believes that parents need to also be aware of what's been taught in schools. And I'm pretty certain every one of you here would agree with that too. I know that this question has a lot to do with that terrible incident with Ghostbusters and the consent issues that seem to be polarising a lot of young people at the moment. And the Māori Party has a unique approach to all this, and it's called whānau order. It's actually ensuring that whatever services a whānau or an individual or a school or a community needs, that services are wrapped around them. And you decide what the outcome should be. You set the solutions, you do the talking, you do the guiding, you own the solution. It is not up to government or any other institution to come along and say to you, bad, do it this way. No, whānau order is an approach that says you decide how we're going to run this. And that's pretty much what the Māori Party is about, empowering you. Kia ora.
Thank you. And I believe, Grant, you wanted to volunteer for this?
Share it, 30 seconds each or something like that.
That should be fine?
Yep. So 30 seconds. And it's cool because I answered this exact question right here in this exact space just a few weeks ago, but I do just want to repeat one really important part of that. Yes, we should have consent, we should have proper sex education about sexualities, the diversity of our community in every single school. But I do want to pick up the LGBTI part of that. You know, LGBTI youth are 4 times more likely to take their own lives than the rest of the community. So we need the resources and the programs to be focused on making sure we understand all of the people who are in our schools. You've got a great school for supporting you here, but we've got to get that out a bit further.
As a very proud and outspoken feminist, I am appalled by our rape culture, and I would very like to be involved in having consent education compulsory across all schools. My little children, who are 6 and 8, are actually learning about consent now, and I think that's fabulous, but it's really patchy. And I take what you're saying, May, but leaving it up to families, not all families are going to educate their children, and especially they're not going to educate their children about the diversity of sexual experience.
Kia ora. I just again want to acknowledge our spokesperson for Women, Jan Logie, who has really led in Parliament on the issue of domestic and sexual violence and on the issue of consent education. As I understand it, under half of the schools in New Zealand actually teach one of the proper sex education, consent education programs. So that shows really how far we have to go. And in particular, she has also championed the rights of the LGBT community, worked with others alongside Grant to do that. And it's critical that we uphold and respect all gender differences in all of our official information, and that's really important.
Hi, so as a mother of a gay son, I'm really supportive of having really good support for LGBTI community in schools, however that takes place, and I think that in some degree it's going to be up to the school and their community on how they actually manage that. And in terms of the sexual consent, I think that is something that should be taught, but how it's taught is up to the school community and the parents, because there's going to be different schools with different emphasis, and it allows them to have that say.
Okay, thank you guys. So this is the last question for all parties, and we're kind of short in time, so please stick to the time limit. Can we please have question 6?
So this is a question from schools in Lincoln and Canterbury. Our country is marketed as 100% pure New Zealand, and yet our waterways are polluted. So how will you hold those responsible accountable, and how will you ensure that our waterways are clean and safe for everyone to enjoy?
This is another 1-minute question, so you'll receive a warning bell when we've got 10 seconds to go, and then again at the final time. Can we start with Jack and Greens?
Kia ora. So this is one of the biggest issues that the Greens are prioritising in this election. In this election we're campaigning on ending poverty in Aotearoa, on taking action on climate change, and on restoring the Māori, on restoring the swimmability of all of our rivers in Aotearoa. Now that's achievable. The Greens have put it on the political agenda over the last few elections, and in this election we're saying that we'll be able to end the pollution that's going into our rivers by stopping the intensification of dairy. We also need to stop the sell-off of our water to overshore companies by way of water bottling, so we'll do that in the form of an excise tax and by a moratorium on new water bottling plants. We need to ensure that there's safe drinking water and that we actually are able to take up the birthright that all New Zealand children have to be able to swim in a clean river. Even 20 years ago when I was a young kid, I was able to swim in my local stream. Now I can't. That's indicative of where we are now in New Zealand.
Thank you. Can we have Carolyn from National?
So National has put in place a clean water policy, which has several different pollutants to be monitored. It's the first time that we've actually had regular routine monitoring of our waterways, and we've said that our target is to have 90% swimmable by 2040. And the reason that we've said 90% swimmable is that is a big target. At the moment there's only 72%, so we're trying to get all of the councils have to prepare statements and have to do the monitoring and are meant to abide by their plans. So they'll be reporting to the Ministry for the Environment and the Environmental Protection Agency. So we have actually put in place for the first time that kind of monitoring, that kind of requirements, so that we will have clean rivers. Also the farming communities have been fencing stock out of the rivers, and we're working with urban councils because actually we're the biggest polluters.
Thank you. Can we have Grant and Labour?
So this one is a big difference between the parties, because all the things that Carolyn said there sound really good, but if you're not actually prepared to say how you're going to do it and how you're going to pay for it, then it's not actually going to happen. So National changed the rules on what is a swimmable river. So it actually didn't have to be as clean as it used to be called swimmable. We want to lift that standard back up, commit ourselves to cleaning up all the rivers and streams in New Zealand within a generation, and we are going to say to the people who take our water for water bottling, you'll have to pay for that, 1 or 2 cents per litre, and for those people who use heaps of water on farms and places like that, they'll pay 1 or 2 cents per 1,000 litres. We'll take that money, which will be about $100 million a year, and we'll spend that on cleaning up the rivers. So you've actually got to say, it's all very well to stand up and say, hey, we want all clean rivers. You've got to say how you're going to do it. We're also going to make sure that we fence around where there are stocks so that they can't get to the water.
Thank you.
Well, kia ora. Okay, Māori are the original kaitiaki, and we want to be heard again around this issue. Okay, water I've found when I've gone through my huge electorate, it's absolutely polarising. The only thing that everyone agrees on is those who pollute the water should actually pay to clean it up. Now this other issue about taxes and royalties, Māori Party think, hang on, Who are they? They don't own the water. We need to have a conversation about who actually owns the water. Because we hear that Labour says everyone owns it, National says no one owns it. The Waitangi Tribunal and the Treaty of Waitangi say Māori own the water. And we want to have this conversation with the Royal Commission of Inquiry to ensure that everyone, businesses, landowners, conservationists, and iwi, especially those who have waterways running through their rohe, get heard. Kia ora.
Jessica.
You know, when we think about our grandparents' generations, and think about things they, generations before us have done, treating women and people of colour like property, or introducing possums and stoats and things to the country, cutting down the native forest, we look back at them and we think, you selfish idiots, what was wrong with you? And I really worry that our grandchildren are going to look back at us and think the same thing, that when we had a chance to do something about climate change and biodiversity and water quality, we just didn't have the courage to do it. And I mean, they're going to be really pissed. It's so unfair. It's so unfair on your generation and the generation that comes after. So what are we going to do about it? We want a strong ETS that includes agriculture. Polluters are going to pay, and that money's going to go back into restoring waterways. We are going to fix this thing now. Our grandchildren can look back and be proud of us.
Sorry, I'm stuck with that. Okay, time is up. Thank you guys so much. You did a really great job at sticking to time. I'd also like to thank everyone joining us online for the questions you submitted. They were amazing, and to the panelists for joining us today. It's really great to see that you guys are so interested and invested in youth affairs. Last but not least, I'd like to say thank you to the volunteers, and especially to Wellington Girls College for hosting us here. And we've got a gift of some single origin coffees for our panelists that have been generously donated by Coffee Supreme. On your way out, guys, there's an exit poll over there, and we'd like you guys to vote and say which party won your vote today if you were voting. And we do encourage you that if you are 18 on September 23rd, that you do vote, and it's a really amazing way to make sure your voices are heard by the people sitting here. Thank you.